Hey, it's Chef Austin here with everythingkitchens.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at the All-American 1930 pressure canner versus the Presto pressure canner, and we're going to find out which one is best for your kitchen. Let's take a look at the construction differences between the All-American 1930 and the Presto pressure canners. When comparing the sizes of the 921 and the Presto 23 quart, the canners land neck and neck. While the Presto has a 1.5 quart advantage over the 921, the manufacturer recommended jar capacities are comparable. Here are the jar capacities for each of the canners. If you're wanting a color other than stainless steel, All-American 1930 is your only choice. Their color coating is a premium cookware grade coating designed to last more than a lifetime. Both the All-American 1930 and the Presto pressure canners are made from high quality, heavy duty aluminum. Aluminum is commonly used in pressure cookers because it is warp resistant and extremely heat conductive. The 921 and the Presto pressure canner differ in aluminum thickness. The 921 features reinforced rims, making its thickest points 12 millimeters compared to the 7 millimeter thickness on the Presto. Overall, the All-American 1930 canner feels like a tank, weighing at almost 18 pounds compared to the Presto at 10 pounds. The All-American canner does come with 2 canning racks, while the Presto's canner only comes with 1. Presto does, however, make a replacement canning rack that is available for purchase. A key difference between the Presto and the All-American is the sealing style. The Presto uses a traditional sealing style that uses rubber gaskets between the lid and the base. While the gaskets ensure a fully pressurized seal, they can also break down over time due to heat exposure. In comparison, the All-American features an exclusive metal-to-metal sealing system that requires no gaskets. The clamping locks seal the lid to the cooker to allow pressure to build. This means there are fewer parts to replace over time. Now that we know a little bit more about each of these canners, we're going to put them in a head-to-head test. We're going to make some canned mixed vegetables and see how they do. The main difference when getting started between the Presto and the All-American canner is the lid design. Presto's lid has a more traditional design with handles that also lock the lid in place and a gasket that ensures a proper seal. The lid of the 921 and other All-American canners feature an exclusive metal-to-metal sealing system that uses screw and wing nuts to keep the lid in place and seal to the base. With Presto, to install the lid, line up the clearly marked arrows on the lid and the canner and twist to lock. The Presto lid has a small air vent / cover lock that automatically pops up when pressure is present and then will pop down when no pressure is present, making it a clear and convenient visual indicator. All-American pressure canners are designed without a gasket. To get started, lightly oil the inner rim with olive oil. To secure the lid, align the arrow on top of the lid a 1/4 inch away from the carved out notch on the base. Then slightly twist the lid so that the clamps lock with the base. Afterward, evenly wiggle the lid to ensure it is level with the bottom. A small gap between the lid and the base will be present and must be even across the canner. At this point, the lid is ready for securing with the wing nuts. While it has a bit of a learning curve for the first couple of uses, the All-American canner lid feels incredibly secure once installed. Getting each pressure canner to reach the desired pressure is a similar process. We placed our jarred food on the inside of the canner and had the water at a simmer of 180 degrees Fahrenheit. We then installed the lid, cranked up the heat, and allowed steam to bellow out of the vent pipe for 10 minutes to allow as much air as possible to escape. Next, we placed the weight on the vent pipe and let each canner come up to the desired pressure. The All-American came up to pressure in just 1 minute and 15 seconds, while the Presto canner took 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Pressure canners need to maintain a steady pressure during the canning process. Once the All-American and Presto pressure cookers were up to pressure, it was our job to ensure they did not go over or under the correct pressure. Regulating pressure requires finding the sweet spot heat setting on your stove. This will allow for just enough heat to keep the pressure steady without fluctuation. So our pressure canner has steamed for 10 minutes. We've added the weight onto the steam vent right there, and we are almost at our desired pressure of 11, and that's according to our recipe and according to our elevation. So I have my stove on the lowest setting right now. It was on the highest setting. I dropped it all the way down to low. Now we need to find the sweet spot. So for this, I'm going to just, as small as possible, make little incremental increases to the heat till I get up to my desired pressure of 11 PSI. I'm going to need to just monitor this and keep watching my dial gauge. And what I want to do to find that sweet spot is to where this dial gauge stays at 11. It doesn't go past 11, it doesn't go under 11. I've got the exact heat that I need on my stove. So we'll check that out. While we're waiting for our recipe to finish up, let's take a look at the safety features you'll find on your Presto Pressure Canner. Up at the front here, you'll see this black little dot here. That is the overpressure plug. And what'll happen to this, if you ever reach the danger zone of pressure, this little plug will pop off and release pressure automatically. So if you accidentally forget about this on the stove or something like that, that is the safety net that you have to prevent any accidents in the kitchen. In the back here, we have the cover lock. You see the cover lock is engaged, so it is pointing up. Whenever there is pressure present in the pressure cooker, that's what you'll see. This actually prevents the lid from physically being removed. So that also prevents accidents if someone tries to remove the lid. While that's engaged, you can't do it. So that'll keep you safe as well. While we wait for our recipe to finish up, let's talk about the safety features you'll find on the All-American Pressure Canner. In the back here, we have the overpressure plug. This plug will automatically pop out if there ever is a dangerous amount of pressure in this pressure cooker. So I also want to talk about this weighted gauge over here. You hear it jiggling, you see it jiggling. This is letting us know we are at the correct temperature and pressure on the inside. So ideally we want to hear 1 to 4 jiggles per minute. That lets us know we're at the right pressure. You'll also see a gear gauge over here. This gear gauge is accurate within plus or minus 2 PSI. So you see how the dial isn't exactly at 15 PSI, which is what our recipe calls for. We're going to go off the weighted gauge. The weighted gauge and its jiggles is actually more accurate than the geared gauge.
Once the cooking time was complete, the burner was turned off and we waited for the pressure of each canner to naturally release. On the Presto, even though our gauge read 0, we did have to wait for the cover lock to pop down, indicating all pressure had been released. This took a total of 17 minutes to fully depressurize. For the All-American, we needed to wait until their gauge read 0, which took 10 minutes to fully depressurize, 7 minutes faster than the Presto. We can now remove the weights from each of the canners. The All-American 1930 recommends waiting 2 minutes after the weight is removed before removing the lid to make sure all pressure is released. Presto also recommends this process, but instead says to wait 10 minutes before opening the canner after the weight has been removed. Overall, from our test, we found that the All-American canner was faster at depressurizing. The great news is that both canners performed as they promised. Both the Presto and the All-American yielded fully sealed jars with no major issues or broken jars. The food coming out of the canners looked identical, giving them equal marks in performance ability. Here are some things to consider when thinking about purchasing the Presto or the All-American.
Let's talk about how we maintain pressure on these two canners. It was quite different because the All-American has a weighted gauge and the Presto has a dial gauge. The dial gauge has these nice numbers on there to tell you what pressure you are at. Whereas the weighted gauge, you will actually see move and jiggle, and you'll actually hear it jiggle when it is at the correct pressure. At first, I thought I was going to like the dial gauge better because I could visibly see what pressure I'm at. But after testing both of these, I actually came to prefer the jiggle weight over here because I could actually hear it. When I could hear it, that allowed me to multitask in the kitchen. So I could go do dishes, I could clean up, I could get ready to do another batch of cans, and I could do all that because I could hear when my jiggle weight was at the correct pressure, and I didn't have to constantly look and check back at my dial gauge to make sure that it was reading at the correct pressure and I didn't have to mess with it. Speaking of maintaining pressure, during our testing in the Presto, it actually raised to 15 or 16 PSI towards the end of the cooking process. Even though we had it on the sweet spot on the stove, it was supposed to be at 11, it raised all the way up to 16. So the reason is because the food on the inside of our jars was changing. So that changed the pressure on the inside of the cooker, which means we had to go and adjust it towards the end of cooking. On the All-American, on the other hand, the entire 75 minutes of cooking, it stayed at the correct pressure, which was 15 pounds of pressure for this recipe, for this type of canner. We didn't have to adjust it at all. If you're looking to can year after year, if you've got a small garden, or if you want to make canning part of your lifestyle, I would confidently recommend the All-American 1930 pressure canner. I love it because it does have that metal to metal seal. There's no gaskets to replace. This weighted gauge is going to be accurate forever. You never have to go get this checked out. And this thing is built like a tank. You can pass this down from generation to generation. If you are canning curious, you don't know if you want to make canning a part of your lifestyle, the Presto is a great entry level option. It gets the job done just fine, but you will have to replace those gaskets and make sure that your gauge is checked once a year by your county's extension office for accuracy. If you found this video helpful, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to us. If you have any questions at all about the All-American 1930 pressure canner or the Presto pressure canner, contact us at everythingkitchens.com.